Good afternoon, everyone. Just want to give people a second to get into the room. Awesome. Hello and welcome. My name is Shakima Appleton. I'm the Vice President of Webinar Programming for Philly SHRM. We want to thank you for joining today's session, Navigating the Backlash, DEI Initiatives in a Changing Political Landscape. During today's presentation, if you have any questions, please feel free to send them via the chat function on your screen, and we will read them aloud at the end of the webcast. We encourage you to change to speaker view for the presentation to allow you the best focus on our speaker. And as a reminder, everyone is currently muted to ensure the best event experience with no distractions. We also ask that everyone makes their Zoom display display to show their full name. By labeling your display name to your full name, we'll be able to ensure that you receive our post-event survey and you receive your HRCI and SHRM credits for attending today's event. To rename your display on Zoom, please go to the list of participants at the top of your Zoom window, then hover over your name and click on the Rename button. Type in your full name and click OK. If you're having any difficulties, please direct message the Philly SHRM participant in the Zoom meeting. If you have not done so already, please follow us on Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Facebook for the latest updates about these workshops, as well as what's happening with Philly SHRM. And don't forget to check out our upcoming events, including our 2025 Philly SHRM Symposium. And to talk a little bit more about our symposium, I just want to check and see if Kim is in the building. I don't see Kim Hugo here. And if she pops in a little later, Kim Hugo is our Vice President of Symposium Programming, and she will tell us a little bit more about the symposium. But we would like to invite you to join us for this elevated experience. We have a new venue, an updated menu, and more reader certification credits, including in this is our complimentary valet parking. Registration is now open, and to take advantage of the early bird pricing and register, go to www.phillyshrm.org. If you have not done so already, and if you're not a member of Philly SHRM, remember that members receive reduced and free event registration fees, big discounts on Philly SHRM Symposium, personal connections to the local HR and business community, our members only resource area, including the membership directory, access to top leaders in our region, a chance to make a difference in our community, and the extensive resources of SHRM National, and lots more. We also want to remind you that you will receive one HR Business HRCI credit and one SHRM Professional Development credit for attending today's webcast. You will receive a follow-up email after this webcast with a survey link. The survey must be completed in order for you to receive your certificate for your credits. Once the survey is completed, the credit forms will be emailed to you within 1 week. So with that, we're going to go ahead and get started. Today's webinar will feature Chantelle Fitzgerald, founder and CEO of Mindset Strategies, LLC, Kaela Blanks, Associate Director of Advisory at Seramount, Regine Williams, Vice President of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion for Philly SHRM, and myself, Shakima Appleton, Manager of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at Cozen O'Connor. And just give me 1 second. And I believe Kim just made it in, so we'll give Kim an opportunity to talk about the symposium before we move on. Kim, I'm going to open the floor to you to speak about the symposium.
Okay, great. Thanks. Hi, everyone. My name is Kim Hugel. I'm sorry, I'm struggling with my camera. I wanted to have a face to go with the name, but can't seem to make it work. But anyway, I wanted to just take a couple of moments to make sure that you're aware of our Philly SHRM Symposium that is taking place on March 20th, 2025 at the Hilton City Avenue. We're really excited about this symposium. We have some great speakers. We have Charlene Lee, who is our keynote speaker, coming and talking about just all the changes, innovations, and the landscape of HR as we know it today, and hopefully the future, what we're planning for. We have a great CHRO panel with CHROs coming from Merck, the Philadelphia Eagles organization, and a few others. With Kelly Jones, who is going to be our facilitator of that discussion. So if you haven't already registered to attend, please go out to the Philly SHRM website. And there is a link at the top that talks about our symposium. You can get more details and you can register right from there. Thank you, Kaela, for putting that in the comments. I can't do two things at once, as you probably figured out by now, but thank you for putting, Kaela put the link to the Philly SHRM website. And if you have any questions or comments about the symposium, feel free to reach out.
Thank you so much, Kim. We appreciate you being here. All right, we're gonna go ahead and get started. Again, welcome everyone. I'm honored to be your moderator for the session today, and we're gonna jump right in. So as you know, diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives have become increasingly vital in creating workplaces where everyone feels welcome and valued. However, in wake of the recent election and the new administration, these initiatives have faced heightened scrutiny and backlash. Today, we're fortunate to have a panel of distinguished DEI professionals who will share their insights and experiences on navigating these challenges. And our discussion will delve into some current political landscape, the resistance with the DEI initiatives, and we'll give some strategies. So without further ado, I'm going to ask the first question, but I would love for our panel to introduce themselves once they answer this question. But in January of 2024, the Society of Human Resource Management, SHRM, announced that it would remove equity from its diversity, equity, and inclusion framework, rebranding it as Inclusion and Diversity, or IND. SHRM CEO Johnny C. Taylor explained that this decision was made because current DEI initiatives were not having the desired impact and the term DEI had become polarized. This move has sparked significant debate, with some applauding the focus on inclusion, while others argue that removing equity undermines efforts to address systemic barriers and create fair workplaces. So given this context, I would love to ask the panelists, how do you view SHRM's decision to drop equity from its framework, and what are the potential implications for organizations and their DEI efforts?
I think, Shakim, I appreciate you set us up and started us off there with the whole dropping of E and equity out of the, I think it was like what IEND, I think is actually how they had referred to it before. Because we are SHRM groups, right? Like we are all on the SHRM board, and even Chantelle, right? You're tri-state SHRM. And I think there's something to be said about that being a leading kind of practice, right? People see SHRM and they say, well, if they're dropping the E, what does that mean for us now? And then people just kind of follow along. So for me, when I saw that happening, first and foremost, as a diversity, equity, and inclusion practitioner, I was like, no, SHRM, like, I believed in you, right? Like, what does this mean? And so it really took me a moment to sit back and be critical and just say, like, well, okay, you said you're dropping the E, but you're not losing equity in the process. And I had a lot of questions for myself, my teams, and also my colleagues. And that seemed to be an ongoing conversation of like, well, can you really keep equity in the conversation if you're not actually calling it out?
Yeah, I'll jump in. Yeah, I couldn't agree more with what Kaela said. And first of all, hello, everybody. I am Chantelle Fitzgerald. It's so great to be here. Thank you so much, Shakima, for moderating this panel and for kicking us off. And thank you all so much for being here. So excited to be here. So I am Chantelle Fitzgerald, founder of Mindset Strategies, and I'm also a partner with Evolution, doing leadership development. And I also do executive coaching, and we also run a leadership institute for Black women as well. And when I heard about SHRM dropping the E, it was actually disheartening. Because this is SHRM. They are one of the leaders of corporations and HR. And so to see their leadership take off the E was really disappointing. And I will say also that in our local Philly chapter, and I'm a Jersey girl and also a Philly SHRM member as well, but I belong to other SHRM chapters. And it was kind of understood that though SHRM National was going to take off the E, we decided as a group, as on the DEI committee of our local SHRM chapter, that we think the E is extremely important, and that we did not want to get rid of the E. But because SHRM is such a national organization, people are going to naturally follow their lead. And it's really unfortunate. And perhaps people didn't really understand what equity really is and what that really means, but it's really just giving people who don't have a fair chance a little bit more to help them get up there, if you will, and providing them with equal opportunities where they didn't have equal opportunities in the past. So that it was just very disappointing, and we're still continuing on with the equity piece in our local chapter, despite what might be going on nationally.
Hi, everyone. Regine Williams. I use the pronoun she, her. I am the Vice President of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion for Philly SHRM. I share the same sentiments as everyone else. I was very, very surprised and kind of hurt, honestly, by seeing the E taken out from SHRM National, because it is such a large organization for human resources professionals, right? And it automatically sends up a red flag. Like if they're doing it, then you expect everyone else to do it too. Or, how do you fall in line with that of SHRM National? One of the largest HR organizations is also removing the E. So we follow the same sentiment as Tri-State as a local chapter. Our president was okay with backing and supporting us keeping the E in our diversity, equity, and inclusion role and committees that we have a part of Philly SHRM. One thing that we have been more intentional about is actually saying diversity, equity, and inclusion versus DEI, because you force people to say, I don't want diversity, I don't want equity, I don't want inclusion, because it's like one of those things where it sends up a red flag, right? You don't want these things, you don't want to be inclusive. So it kind of makes you look back at yourself when you're saying those terms out loud to other people, when you're trying to figure out whether you're going to move forward with diversity, equity, and inclusion.
I saw Amy dropped in the chat a question around, do we find that other local and regional chapters of SHRM are also opting out to drop equity? It's such a great question, Amy. And, I am noticing it, I hate to say it in like probably like middle of the road terms, but it's definitely kind of a flux. You see some chapters, I would almost argue maybe even smaller chapters who might have just automatically aligned because maybe that's where their policies or processes kind of just align to exactly one for one with what SHRM National does. Whereas I do see a lot of the bigger chapters might have a little bit more of that independent focus of where like they just decided to keep the E. I don't think a lot of chapters are making the big announcements in the way that SHRM National decided to do. And this is my perspective from when I went to our state council meeting, actually. I went to the state council conference like a couple weeks, maybe 2 months or so afterwards. And there was actually some discussion there happening. And some chapters, to be frank with you all, weren't even talking about it because they didn't even have specific diversity, equity, and inclusion focused person or practices or group or committee anyway. So some weren't even thinking about it on the smaller chapter scale as well. So it definitely ranged a little bit, but it wasn't this big mass. Everybody was dropping it to follow suit with SHRM National.
Thank you so much. And I agree, language is everything. And Regine mentioned, spelling it out. And I know in the private sector it's the same. We've also decided to say diversity, equity, and inclusion versus just saying DEI or DENI. So language is truly everything. And then just segueing a little bit from that, in January of 2025, President Trump issued executive orders aimed at ending diversity, equity, and inclusion programs within the federal government. And these orders titled Ending Radical and Wasteful Government DEI Programs and Ending Illegal Discrimination and Restoring Merit-Based Opportunities mandate the termination of DEI-related mandates, policies, programs across the federal agencies. This shift has had a ripple effect, as you may imagine, influencing private sector companies to reconsider their DEI commitments. For example, companies like Amazon and Meta and McDonald's and Boeing have scaled back or dismantled their DEI programs, citing the changing legal and political landscape. And given these developments, how do you all see these executive orders impacting diversity initiatives in the private sector?
Yeah, I can kick us off on that because I was directly affected by the executive orders. One of my clients actually was the IRS. And I was scheduled, and I have been doing work with the IRS for several years now, doing leadership development training for their managers and directors and higher level leaders. And it was been going well. In fact, the leadership program that we do was one of the highest rated leadership training programs in the IRS. Compared to all other leadership trainings, we had the highest scores, the best attendance, and the most sought after leadership training at the IRS. And we were literally preparing. We were about to do this IRS training the last week in January. And we had a meeting on a Tuesday, getting ready for it and preparing for it. And then by Thursday, we heard that it was completely taken out. Now, I will say out of 12 modules, we did have one module on DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion. We had one module, and that was module 11 out of 12. And nothing else kind of talked about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And because there was the presence of DEI, they totally threw the baby out with the bathwater. It was completely eliminated, and the entire training gone just like that, literally with the snap of a finger. So yes, it has hit us personally, and my business personally, and because the federal government and the way that they move have such power and influence, that it is definitely trickling down. I run a leadership institute for Black women. There have been several companies that have now decided not to invest in Black women leaders. And that is the equity part of the work that I do, actually. And it's just so interesting because the clients that have invested in this program have invested for the last 4 years. The program has been going exceptionally well. The women in this program have gotten to the next level, and they have retained their clients, or I'm sorry, their employees. So everything was going well. So it's just amazing how in just one fell swoop, it can all be taken away, just like that. So that has been the impact currently and right now. But I will say, though the words diversity, equity, and inclusion are now completely polarized and nobody wants to say those words anymore, I will also say that this work is not going away and it will never go away. So there will be another iteration of this. If it's not DEI or diversity, equity, and inclusion, there's going to be another iteration. It will never go away. It will just transform into another thing. And we are working on that, and it's evolving as we speak. So that's kind of how it's impacted me personally, and also what I've seen other corporations and how it's impacted them. And then of course there's those companies that are standing strong, and that's a beautiful thing. So I'll pass on to another panelist. I don't want to take up all the airspace.
Yeah, no, you were fine. You were right on it. I mean, I was gonna add in this layer of like, we can't believe all the headlines, right? Like, don't get me wrong, there are a lot of organizations rolling back diversity, equity, and inclusion. What I'm seeing in the private sector is people maybe renaming or saying, can we have different conversations? What does frustrate me at times though is I think that organizations are so risk avoidant that they are almost overextending and over risk mitigating, right, what they're saying in the world. And because that's the thing, these executive orders that are coming out directly have to be followed by federal agencies and then federal contractors, depending on how much money you want from your federal government anymore, are then going to be impacted if you want to like abide by them, right? And then the hard part is then the private sector sees that and says, well, we should be proactive because it's going to impact us anyway. We saw that when affirmative action was rolled back and everybody said, well, affirmative action was rolled back. We got to stop data collecting and hiring and doing all of our representation-based hiring or practices or policies. And I said, you know, that impacts higher education, right? Like affirmative action is for the higher education sector. You as the private sector still have a lot of power. And I think that's the piece for me that I would love to see more from organizations and companies is kind of standing firm in it and speaking out and saying, no, we're going to do it like the Costco's, right? Like, how can we be more like Costco, which I feel like is a statement I've said more often than not, actually, is how can we be more like Costco and be great in this work? So that, you know, it's definitely impacting the private sector. I think there's a lot more companies who are standing firm in it than what we're seeing in the news, which is unfortunate that we're not hearing more about it.
Yeah, I think just to add to that, what I've been seeing in the private sector, at least following the executive orders, um, people revisiting the language, looking over their programs, looking over their policies, and really saying, is it something that can be illegally challenged, right? And what's the definition of illegal DE&I? Because that has yet to be said, to be honest. So it's still like a lot of gray area in what we're actually allowed and what we're not allowed to do following the executive orders. One note that I do want to add is that there is a group of people targeting the private sector, right? Looking for the words DE&I, diversity, equity, inclusion, culture, belonging, whatever else you want to add into it, and targeting organizations that are in the private sector so they can able to either challenge these things or do something legal in the courts and things like that as you're practicing DEI, because at this point they don't want to see it. So they feel like if you're changing the language, right, you're hiding something. So they have this organization that's combing through different websites, their proxy statements, anything that's public facing, to be honest, is on these private sector websites. So one thing that we've been doing and looking at is really what the new language will be, right? Is it DEI 2.0? Is it all inclusive just to inclusion and in culture? Like, what are the new terms that we'll be using? And really just trying to get ahead of that. Like, we haven't swayed from it at all, but it's really just trying to revisit our language, look at our programs. One organization that did it really well as McKinsey and Company. They have a program was targeted, excuse me, towards those disadvantaged, right? Asians, Blacks, and Hispanics in the workplace in corporate America. But now they have since transitioned to say this program is open to all, right? But they take the perspective and lens of these individuals that's going through the workplace and face these challenges. If you would like to learn from this lens and perspective, you're more than welcome to attend, but understand that you'll, regardless of your background, take this development course from this perspective of this individual. So if you switch your language just like that, right, I think it puts you into the more positive space, but of course we really won't know until they define what diversity, equity, and inclusion is illegally from those executive orders.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I just wanted to like throw in here, because it frustrates me a lot as a diversity, equity, inclusion practitioner, like all of my programs that I've ever had to run or do or put policies in place always were also merit-based first and foremost. So like,
Yeah.
I think that's also a misconception. I even see, and I'm going to say it out there, like SHRM National, right, is calling out and saying, if you're addressing your programs, are they merit-based? Well, like,
Yeah.
if you weren't having bare minimum standards of you have to be good and like hitting certain expectations of work or performance or showing up in the workplace, like, I never knew not one person who was going through these programs I was creating who wasn't already a superstar in the first place, right? Like that's the equity piece. And I think that's where I'm really genuinely concerned as a practitioner in the spaces that we are glossing over, that inclusion still needs equity. And it still needs to create that, to your point, Chantelle, a fair starting place for people. And Regine, to your point of like, yeah, we can create these open to all spaces, but how are we still not going to backside from what we know are historical and systems that hold people back?
Because we definitely seen it before. We've been here already, right? So it's really like we tried the merit thing already. It's going backwards to me, to be honest. Like we tried the merit thing already. That's why DEI became a thing, right? And that equity piece is really important to give people access and equal opportunity. So it's really just like Chantelle said, the evolution of what DEI is going to be. And it'll be interesting, I think, the next 4 years just to see what's to come of it. Because to be honest, January and February has already felt like 2025 has beginning and ended already.
Yeah,
because I can't keep up. It's like executive order after executive order that just keeps coming out. So it's really just like, what's next? Like my head is literally spinning. Like if you ever seen the GIF with SpongeBob and a crazy background, like that's literally how I feel. So I honestly, it's a scary time. Like I had to really sit back and be like, should I just rethink my career path? Should I be, thinking about where else I can use my skills and my talents? Should I be talking to my supervisor about renaming my job title, right? Because it has diversity, equity, inclusion in the actual title. So it's just a lot of things as DEI professionals and practitioners that we really have to just sit back and, think about. It's like a whole therapy session here right now, but yeah.
Yeah, I also want to mention to both of your points and kind of add on and especially that merit part about how if you hire somebody of a diverse background that they definitely don't have the merit to be there. And I will say it could not be further from the truth. I run a leadership institute for Black women. I work and I am a Black woman who has worked with minority or marginalized identities my whole life. And I can tell you that they have more experience, more education, doctorate degrees, way more than a lot of their superiors, their bosses. We want to learn more, get all the education, and the women that I coach in my cohorts, they go above and beyond. It's just incredible. So it's also a slap in the face to the hard work that marginalized identities actually put in, not only through education, but having to always have to prove themselves because they are a marginalized identity, that they are sometimes beyond qualified for opportunities. And it's just so interesting how we see in the federal government now that people don't even have to have a certain level of a certain rank just to be able to get the highest job in the land, right? Or even another department. So it's just completely asinine. And honestly, diversity, equity, and inclusion is leadership development. I mean, let's just call it that. We are training leaders to be more effective, to be more inclusive, to have more empathy, to be better listeners, to be more inclusive. At the end of the day, DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion is leadership development at the end of the day. That is exactly what we are doing when we are training and supporting our employees and sharpening our skills. We are getting better at who we are and more inclusive so that everybody feels like they belong. And who doesn't want to belong in a workplace at the end of the day?
Yeah, y'all make me think about how, like, if we're going to talk about merit-based, programs or hiring or whatever that might look like and mean for you all, are we going to get rid of like prioritizing referrals? Because like, I just need to understand if we're bringing in the CEOs, like,
Let's talk about it.
I'm just asking, right? I mean, it's the same conversation in higher ed, right? If we're gonna get rid of affirmative action, we're also gonna get rid of legacies. Like these are the conversations that I would love to make sure that we're thinking about in organizations. Is like, okay, we're gonna say merit, then I want merit for all of that. You know what I mean? I don't want to be we're just not gonna take the boss's referral just because they're besties, right? They went golfing the other day. So like, that's all I'm gonna put out there is if we're gonna hold one group accountable for doing some work, we're gonna hold all the other ones accountable for the same thing. And Chantelle, you made me think about DEI being a part of leadership development. And honestly, I will say, and I'm going to say this very lightly, I am intrigued if this push will really help make diversity, equity, and inclusion embedded in our HR practices. I think for too long, it became two separate teams and two separate groups. And I've always maintained I'm an HR professional at heart, even though I practice DEI and I specialize in this work, because HR is talent, right? That is where inclusion policies, procedures, our organizations are like really honed and they have so much power there. So maybe this will be a really great opportunity for my HR folks and my HR friends and colleagues to really think about how they can just take this work versus it being that separate title, job, role.
Yeah, certainly. And Kaela, you lead into our next discussion actually, and thinking about how HR and DEI professionals can work together. And if you need both in DEI professionals and HR professionals. So we've seen that there's been, increased scrutiny. That's what we're talking about today. And according to a recent Forbes article, many DEI professionals feel gutted and uncertain about the future of their work. And the emotional and financial toll on these professionals is substantial. And some of them even experiencing things like burnout and even personal concerns about, their safety. And wanting to talk about at you all as DEI professionals and, myself included, how are you coping with these changes? And, if you can give advice to our, HR colleagues that are not, say, a manager, director of diversity, equity, and inclusion or such, how they can support the individuals within their organizations, but also support those who are actually on the ground, boots down, doing the work.
Yeah, I can kick this off. Definitely. I would say my word for 2025 is community. And the importance of being in community of like-minded individuals, as well as I think we talked about it, and actually, Shakima, I think you and I have talked about this radical self-care, right? And how it is so important in this time to take care of yourself in any and every way possible. So whether that is just taking a break, that's being with your family, with your kids, if that's stressful, going outside and just enjoying nature is always a renourishing move. But whatever it is for you, I think, for those DEI professionals that are feeling burnt out, that are feeling exhausted, really, and crushed by everything that's going on, I would definitely say, take a break, breathe, relax, take care of yourself. We run a leadership institute for Black women and also a leadership institute for women of color. You're welcome to come to us. We will create a community and nourish you, but really find the things that support your well-being, whatever that is for you. And if you're not sure, seek help to help you find what nourishes you and what brings you joy. Because right now, it's so important to take care of yourself and be in community with other like-minded individuals and to leverage your power, because we all have power. We even though it might not feel like it and things are like, moving at lightning speed, we all have the power within us to give to where we feel is most meaningful. And that's on every level, emotionally, mentally, and financially. So I would just consider what your values are and identify communities, organizations, companies that align with your values and go there. That would be my advice, but take care of you will be essential right now.
Yeah, I agree with that. And this is something near and dear to me because I do a lot of talks on, self-care for busy professionals, and especially in a time like this. And when Chantelle and I were having a conversation, it was in her leadership institute that I actually went through myself. And we were just having a candid moment speaking about everything that we're talking about today. And one of the things that I shared with the group was, the importance of mindfulness techniques and doing what you need for you. I know that first week after the inauguration, and then when all of the executive orders and things just started changing really rapidly, my day-to-day job changed. It was more hands in the pot, more people were interested in what was going on. We also had like some misinformation in the news, and everybody had questions. And so by the time my day was over, my cortisol levels were, through the roof. My stress levels were through the roof. And I told Chantelle and the group that day, I said, every day that week, I had to literally turn my computer off, my TV off, everything that had sound, I had to turn it off and just like kind of sit in my own silence for a bit because there's so much noise outside. So I think it's very important for you, folks that are, DEI professionals or people that, support it, but also HR professionals who are, trying to navigate this, political world right now as well in your organizations, to think about, what does that self-care practice look like for me? Because I can tell you a million things that you could do, but only you know what works for you. And I think it's important to, dial back and understand and identify when you feel like you need to pull back, because there is so much happening so fast that you do have to pull back. And you have to know what your level of that is. I found out my level really quickly. I thought I knew my level until the end of January, over early February. And I was like, I don't know. I thought I can handle a lot, but this is a lot. So I think you need to, that's some self-evaluation and some things that you have to do for yourself, and know that, you're supported, you have resources, you have people on this call here that you can reach out to. When we were preparing for this call, that was like, Regine said, this is like a therapy session, right? But it's true. It's really true. You should reach out to, folks if you need it. Just figure out what works for you.
Yeah, I think just to echo that, that you really have to be intentional, right? To step away and turn off the noise. If it means stepping away from social media, whatever that looks like for you. For me, I love Peloton. So I automatically just go into, my tread or the bike. Peloton has this amazing meditation as well for you to do, that I do maybe 10 or 15 minutes a day just to quiet the noise, because it's a lot going on and it's happening really, really fast. So like walks outside as well. I love the sunshine. So I mean, wintertime sucks for me, but when I can get some sun, I'm having a good time outside. So really just stepping outside of my reality kind of, I guess. And kind of going into like my own little bubble is what I do to try to make sure that I'm getting everything that I need. Forums like this as well, like with like-minded professionals, stepping outside of just the Philly SHRM organizations as well, going to other professional organizations within inside of the Philadelphia or greater Philadelphia area events and community and things like that. Like I think it goes all the way back to that word, right? Community, and really just trying to be intentional with connecting with one another and really just sharing, your pain points. And if you don't know if it's okay to vent to somebody, ask them before, like, you okay if I vent to you right now? Because you may not have the mental capacity to do so. You're like, are you okay to hear this right now? And this is just a simple question, like, are you okay? It's something that you can ask. And intentionally don't, say, yeah, okay, I'm fine. Really think about it. Like, am I actually okay? When somebody asks, how are you? You just automatically, your automatic response is, oh yeah, all is well, and continue about your day. But really sit with it and really say to yourself, am I actually okay? I think is some of the things that I've been sitting with and trying to make sure that I'm okay mentally for everyone else around me.
Yeah, my form of self-care probably isn't always the best of habits. Probably, I'm not getting on the Peloton though. I'm trying to get the Planet Fitness a little bit more, right? I made it like twice this week, which is feeling pretty good. This cold weather has me not wanting to go outside. But I will say for me, when I think about self-care is the boundaries piece of it, but I'm also just at this point really good at disassociating and saying, hey, I can control what I can control. I can't control what's happening up in these executive offices and federal levels of things, but what I can do is stay informed and educated and aware of what's happening so that I can communicate and have conversations with my peers, because I do tell people that I'm a diversity, equity, inclusion practitioner, which always spirals into an interesting conversation. But those are where I kind of like feel like I'm making little moments of change. Like, how can I really talk about like what this work really is and what it is, and demystify all of the random headlines, but then I'm taking action in my local communities. Like, that's where I feel like I have the control and the impact and the power to be and to do and to make change happen, So, what other, I'm involved in like our local, one of our LGBTQ plus Chamber of Commerce's here in Philadelphia. And that has given me a lot of avenues to continue to feel like I'm making an impact and making some change happen, or at least supporting my local groups and identities. So that's really where I'm leaning into outside of some of my other vices that maybe we could talk about offline, if anybody's interested in those. Reggie, don't laugh, don't laugh. I know you know.
I know.
I think Teresa knows too.
I know, she's making faces over here.
So as we we start to pivot on our time, and we're a little bit over 15 minutes, I want to encourage everyone, if you have questions, feel free to throw them in the chat. If you wanted to raise your hand, you can do that as well. But we're going to kind of go to this last part of this conversation, and I want you all to share some final thoughts. These challenges are affecting all of us, whether you're a DEI professional or not. If you are doing any kind of HR for an organization, these things are affecting you and affecting your organization in some way. So I want to ask you all to just kind of give us some top, advice or some tips that our HR professionals on this call today can take away and take back to their organization. To wrap up this conversation today. And of course, I invite anyone who has questions, you can raise your hand and or put a question in the chat, and we'll be happy to answer those. Okay, I'll go first. So my takeaway is I really think we need to understand headlines versus reality, right? Because we hear about these executive orders and people have their everyone has a thought maybe of what it is, or maybe not really clear what those things are. And so I just had like a couple points. I work for a law firm. I'm not an attorney, so don't take it as legal advice. It's just me giving you the facts about what the executive orders actually are and how they affect the private sector, because I think it's, context is important. And so the executive orders really are what they are set to be is to end illegal discrimination, right? So they're revoking DEI related, these orders revoke DEI related practices, right? So that means that that's talks about ceasing promotion for women and minorities and federal contract and work at federal contractor companies, right? That doesn't mean the private sector at this point. While we do know that they probably have their eye on the private sector at some point, that they're not there yet. They're really right now only talking about in the federal government. And the same thing about ending these DEI programs in federal agencies. So again, in the private sector, these things haven't gotten there yet. But if you're a federal contractor, even though they haven't gotten there yet, that's maybe something for you to think about and start to just have on your radar. We are not required to abandon any DEI programs because they're not, essentially unlawful. So you can continue to implement like your DEI programs because we still have like the Title VII, right? The Civil Rights Act of, 1964. We still have those things, right? Title IX, we still have those things there. We must still comply, if you're a federal contractor, to the affirmative action, to affirmative action for individuals with disabilities and covered veterans. So those things don't go away. So these are executive orders. They're not law, right? At this point. So it's just a matter of, you hear executive orders, you're like, oh my God, we can't do diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. And that is not reality. That, if you have counsel, in-house counsel, you should probably think about, chatting with them, because they should have a general idea of what's happening in this landscape. And if you are not sure, I think I would ask, opposed to just kind of reading the headlines and running with that. And so that's where I sit with, I would say my final thoughts is really just to ask questions and don't take everything you hear on the news for face value. You really do need to seek professional, whether it's, a legal professional, or if you don't have in-house counsel or general counsel in your organization, maybe think about what that legal professional or that organization would be. But I think to ask questions and just, it's a lot of noise outside, just before you take everything that you see, go do your own research and make your own informed decisions before you make a decision that will affect you, affect your workplace, but ultimately it will affect your livelihood and your family.
Yeah, I think in the word of diversity, equity, and inclusion and human resources, right? Our partner in this charge is really legal, and really trying to make sure that we're legally doing these things and pushing the right narrative forward. And it's more about the storytelling piece, right? Like, what story are you trying to tell your organization within DE&I, and what you all are trying to push forward through these diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives? I really think it's a business imperative, right, to continue to charge no matter what they say, whatever the terms change to, is really just important that we continue as we've been doing, and really just trying to change this narrative around DE&I, whatever that looks like in the future. So just continue forward with what you're doing. Partner with your legal team, ask the questions when you need to, because it's really important. If you don't have those internal resources, look external. Like, there's a professor from NYU, Kenji Oshino, that does really good articles around DE&I and what it looks like, and the language changes and things like that. So that's someone that I personally lean on, and their resources to really look at and learn about what's coming next for myself. And then that you see come up, the EEO1s, forms and things like that, just to really understand what the legal impact is. And to be honest, it's right now in this present time, it's still kind of gray. So it's really like you being intentional to try to figure out what that gray area looks like, because they still have yet to know what illegal DEI looks like outside of you being, I guess, racist or something like that. So really just trying to be intentional with your learnings and trying to figure out what that looks like for you and your organization.
Yeah, I will piggyback off of that and say that at the end of the day, though they are trying to gut diversity, equity, and inclusion, I will double down and say it's never going away. It might have a different iteration, but it's never going away. And I want to underscore or underline the fact that when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion, we're really talking about humanity. We're talking about respect. And I would just encourage you all to just remember humanity, because that's really what this work is about. How do we respect people? How do we make sure that they feel like they belong? How do we create an environment where there's psychological safety, where you can feel comfortable to be yourself and share what you need to say without feeling like you're going to get backstabbed or fired? How do we make sure that as leaders ourselves in our own organizations, that we are thinking about the humans that are working with us and for us? And so my tip is just to remember that we're human. First, we are all human. We all want to feel like we belong. We all want psychological safety. And we as leaders have the responsibility of creating psychologically safe environments for the people that we work with, above us, across from us, below us. And so the onus is truly on us as leaders to take DEI and embed it in our own practices as leaders so that it shows up in your own leadership every day. So that would be my encouragement to you, is that it's already in us. We can practice this every day. We don't necessarily, have to have the words, but we can absolutely have the behavior. And so I would encourage you to continue to own your power, to have the behavior of belonging, of creating psychologically safe environments, of respect, of empathy and compassion. And we can be that every day. So, so no matter what is going on in this world, and whatever executive orders come next, or whatever dismantling comes next, we as humans can still create cultures of belonging and safety, and community and belonging. So that's my 2 cents. I think it comes from within. And if we can practice that, it doesn't matter what happens because it's in us and we're doing it. So that's my 2 cents.
I co-sign everything that everybody said. I'm going to add on one more thought of oh my God, I just lost my train of thought. And now that I'm like losing my train of thought, I'm moving it further. Oh yes. So my recommendation is to, or my thoughts are to pause, think, then act, or breathe, think, then act. A lot of what's happening right now in the world is to create chaos. It is to create this sense of like anxiety and stress, and that we're running at 100 miles a minute, and we're over here focusing, and everything in the headlines is diversity, equity, and inclusion and DEI, but we don't see maybe the other things that are impacting our world and our society and our groups. So before we jump to taking action, I encourage all of us to just pause, breathe, think, and then take that action, and figure out what we do for sustainable change or for sustainable work moving forward. Because in my personal hope and like, positivity, right? This is for a short period of time, and we rally together and build that community together, and we can stand firm instead of just kowtowing and backsliding into practices that maybe are not going to help us in the long term and in the future.
Wonderful. And so we're going to leave the last couple minutes for questions and or comments. So you can feel free to come off mute if you would like. You can raise your hand, we could call on you, or you can put something in the chat, but we want to honor your time to give you opportunity to give some kind of comments or ask any questions that you may have for anyone on the panel.
I do want to do a quick call out because Kevin mentioned about employee resource groups.
Yeah.
We do see a lot of organizations really doubling into and kind of leaning into ERGs. My point is just be mindful of the leaders who are taking on the extra work if your organization is thinking about that or utilizing that. I am also seeing a big trend of groups and organizations evaluating what impact they're having. So maybe they're not always having the products and service and business impact, but they're having maybe more focusing on community engagement and activity building and things of that nature. So that is definitely something that we're seeing as a trend, and ERGs are still holding firm. And I think that's the piece too. If we're embedding this work and empowering our just general everyday people to want to be a part of diversity, equity, inclusion, and create more inclusive spaces of belonging, it won't. Like to Chantelle's point, we're here. We can only go back for so far. Of course, Nicholas, we always have guidance around starting ERGs. Let's chat offline because we could spiral into that, and I can definitely help you on that one.
Yeah, we definitely love the ERG conversation.
Yes.
That's my jam.
Yeah, maybe there's a next session on ERGs.
We did do it last year, right?
We did. Yeah, we
So maybe
did.
we should do it again.
Yeah.
Yes, an encore session.
Absolutely.
I guess all I would just say, thank you, Kaela, for that backtrack to the ERG comment. I loved what you said also in the chat about the importance of mentorship. So I think the other takeaway I'm getting out of this is I'm leaning in on mentoring people that don't look like me. And I would say that's one of the ways we can be allies and keep this important work alive.
Yeah. I would also add to that, Kevin, is not only being a mentor, but being a sponsor.
Sponsor.
You know,
Yes.
and that is also extremely needed to get other marginalized identities to the next level and speaking high praises behind their back to the powers that be. That is also significantly needed as
100%.
well. Yeah,
Yes.
thank you for that. And I like your music therapy. There's also equine therapy if anybody likes horses.
Yeah, so my self-care used to be donuts, now it's music, so it's all good.
Nice.
Nice transition, Kevin.
I've seen them lean into mindfulness in the workplace too. Outside of like the ERG space, there's been a lot of communities inside of my organization where they're being more intentional about mindfulness and just making sure that you are taking care of yourself actually in the workplace, like not outside of your day to day. So they have a hour per week where you get to step away from the chaos and what's going on and just enjoy your company of your colleagues. So that's also something I've been seeing in this space, in addition to the employee resource groups as well.
Yeah, that's so interesting that you said that. Thank you for saying that, Regine. I actually in 2020 I used to lead a meditation session actually during 2020 where anybody could pop in and for 30 minutes do a meditation session during, you know, COVID times where everybody was just like, what's happening? And I feel like 2025 is also like a COVID moment. In some ways, like what's happening. So yeah, so that's a really good point, and happy to kick those off again if people are interested.
100%, Chantelle. Do it.
Yes.
Wonderful. Thank you all so much. We plan this out, and we hope that you gain some type of insight from, this discussion. And, just remember that, DEI is not just about compliance. It's not a compliance issue. It's really a fundamental aspect of what we do as HR professionals, and it should be intertwined in all the things that we do within the organization. So I really hope that you all enjoyed this conversation. Feel free to reach out to us. We just want to thank you for joining us, and to look out for the follow-up email with the link to the survey, and be sure to complete that so that you can get your HRCI and SHRM credits. But on behalf of this panel and behalf of Philly SHRM, we thank you again for attending, and enjoy your rest of your afternoon.
Thank
Thanks,
you,
everyone.
Fatima, for moderating for us. Thank you all for joining.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody.